What if everything you have ever been told about getting a flat stomach is completely wrong, not slightly off, completely and fundamentally wrong from the very beginning? The sit-ups you have been forcing yourself to do every morning are not fixing the real problem. The crunches are not either. And the endless calorie counting that leaves you hungry and miserable every single day is not the answer. Here is what nobody is telling you openly. There is one simple exercise that can tighten and tone your midsection better than anything you have ever tried before. But before we get to that exercise, you need to understand something important first. Without this understanding, even the best exercise in the world will not give you the results you are looking for. So stay with me all the way through. What you are about to learn will completely change the way you see your own body and how it actually works. Let us start with the biggest lie in the entire fitness world. Eat less and move more. Create a calorie deficit. It sounds so clean and so logical on the surface. Almost every single person has tried this approach at some point in their life. You cut your portions down. You skip the evening snacks. You push through the hunger every day, telling yourself it will be worth it. And for the first week, or maybe two, it seems like it is working. The scale moves a little. You feel hopeful. You think you finally figured it out. But then something shifts. The weight loss slows down to almost nothing. The hunger becomes unbearable. The cravings hit harder than before. And slowly, painfully, you end up right back where you started. Most people at that point blame themselves. They tell themselves they did not have enough discipline. They were not consistent enough. They gave up too easily. But here is the truth. You did not fail that diet. That diet failed you. And there is a very specific and well-documented biological reason why this keeps happening to millions of people every year. Every time I sat down with someone in their 40s or 50s who had been battling their weight for years, I would ask them the same question. When did losing weight start feeling truly impossible for you? The answer was almost always the same. It started in their late 20s or early 30s, right around the exact time they began doing repeated calorie restrictive diets. Think carefully about what that pattern means. The very tool they were using to try to lose weight was likely the exact thing that made losing weight harder and harder over time. We have been running this experiment as a society for several decades now. Millions upon millions of people cutting calories, tracking every bite, and fighting hunger every single day of their lives. And yet, the rates of obesity and stubborn belly fat have only continued to rise during that entire time. That result alone should tell us something very important is missing from this picture. The calorie deficit model on its own is simply not a sustainable long-term solution for the vast majority of real people living real lives. And once you understand the biology behind why, everything finally starts to make sense. Your body is not a machine. This is the exact point where most people's understanding of weight loss completely breaks down and falls apart. We have been trained to think of our bodies like a simple fuel tank. Pour in less fuel and the tank empties out. The math works and the weight comes off. If only it were actually that simple. But your body is a living, breathing, constantly adapting biological system. It responds to its environment in ways that a car engine simply cannot. And the system responsible for all of that adaptation is called the endocrine system. The endocrine system is your body's internal communication network. It uses hormones to send signals throughout your entire body, telling it how to respond to what is happening around it. When you cut your calories significantly, your body does not simply say, okay, we will just burn the stored fat now to make up the difference. That is not how it works at all. Instead, your body reads the situation as a threat. It senses that food intake has dropped. It interprets that as potential danger, and then it begins to protect you from what it perceives as starvation. Your metabolism starts to slow down. Your body becomes dramatically more efficient at running on less food than it used to need. It essentially learns to travel further on the same amount of fuel as before. And then on top of all of that, your hunger hormones increase. Your cravings become louder and more persistent. Your willpower gets tested every single hour of every single day without relief. So now you are eating less than you ever have. You are hungrier than you have ever been. Your metabolism is running slower than it was before you started, and the weight is still not coming off the way you expected. That experience is not a personal failure or a lack of discipline. That is your body executing its survival programming with perfect precision. Biology always wins in the end. This is the fundamental reason why the calorie deficit model fails so many people over and over again. It triggers the very mechanisms that make fat loss harder rather than easier. But here is where the real answer begins to come into focus. And it all starts with understanding one hormone that almost nobody thinks about when they are trying to lose weight. That hormone is insulin. And truly understanding what insulin does inside your body will permanently change the way you think about fat loss and how to achieve it. There is a medical textbook called Guyton's Physiology. This is not a trending wellness book or a popular diet blog. This is one of the most respected and widely used medical texts in schools around the entire world. One section of this book states very clearly that all aspects of fat metabolism are greatly enhanced in the absence of insulin. Read that again slowly because it matters enormously. Another section of the same book explains that when carbohydrates are not being used for energy, almost all of the energy your body needs must come from the metabolism of fats instead. These are not theories or opinions from someone trying to sell you a program. These are established physiological facts documented inside a standard medical textbook used to train doctors. Insulin is the gatekeeper of fat burning in your body. When your insulin levels are high, your body is locked in storage mode. It is physically and chemically unable to access your stored fat for energy, regardless of how little you eat. When your insulin levels drop low enough, everything changes completely. The gatekeeper steps aside. Your body can finally reach into its fat stores and begin using that stored fat as real usable fuel. This is the switch that almost every mainstream diet never actually flips. They focus entirely on calories while completely ignoring the hormonal environment that determines what your body does with those calories. So what controls insulin more than anything else in your diet? The answer is carbohydrates. Not dietary fat, not protein. Carbohydrates are the primary and most powerful driver of insulin release in the human body. When you compare all three macronutrients side by side, their effects on insulin are dramatically different from one another. Carbohydrates spike insulin quickly and significantly. Protein produces a moderate and much smaller response. Dietary fat is essentially neutral and barely affects insulin levels at all. So when someone confidently tells you that a calorie is a calorie and only the total number matters, that statement is ignoring the entire hormonal reality of how your body actually processes different foods. Where your calories come from determines whether your body spends the day actively storing fat or actively burning it. This difference is enormous and it changes everything about your results. Two different people can eat the exact same number of calories every day and have completely different fat burning outcomes based purely on what those calories are made of and how those foods affect insulin. This is precisely why the type of food you eat matters just as much as the quantity. If you genuinely want to lose body fat in a lasting and sustainable way, you must bring insulin down. To bring insulin down, you must reduce your carbohydrate intake significantly. This is not a fad diet trend that will disappear next year. This is human physiology that has been documented in medical literature for many decades. Most people were simply never taught it in a clear and practical way. Now here's where things become genuinely exciting. This is the part that transforms the experience for people when they finally live it themselves. When you reduce your carbohydrates significantly enough, your body is forced to find a completely different source of fuel to run on, and it finds that fuel in fat, not just the fat from the food on your plate. Your own stored body fat becomes available and accessible as a real fuel source for the first time. Think about what that actually means for a moment and let it sink in fully. Your body has been carrying around a massive reserve of stored energy this entire time, sometimes for years or even decades, but a high carbohydrate diet keeps insulin elevated and keeps all of that stored energy completely locked away. The moment you lower your carbs enough and bring insulin down, that stored fat becomes truly accessible. Your body opens the reserve tank it has been keeping sealed shut and begins using what is inside. Think of your stored body fat as a biological backup pantry. It exists for exactly this purpose in human biology. It was designed specifically to fuel your body during periods when food from outside is not available or not enough. But if you are constantly eating carbohydrates and constantly spiking insulin throughout the day, that pantry door never opens. Your body keeps demanding more food from outside while the pantry sits completely full and entirely untouched. Here's a simple and practical way to picture the difference this makes. Imagine you are eating around 1,500 calories per day from a low carbohydrate diet. Your body is not just running on those 1,500 calories you ate. It is simultaneously pulling an additional 500, 600, maybe even 800 or more calories from your own stored body fat on top of that. You are running on your food and your own body fat at the same time. Your total available energy is significantly higher than what you actually consumed, and the result of that combination is remarkable and real. Your hunger fades away naturally. The cravings that used to dominate your entire day simply stop showing up, not because you are forcing yourself to ignore them through sheer willpower and discipline, but because your body is genuinely and completely satisfied. inside. It is being fed from two sources simultaneously, and it has everything it needs to function well. There is no signal of starvation, no alarm going off, no desperate craving for more food. Now compare that experience directly to simply cutting your calories without lowering your carbohydrates at the same time. Insulin stays elevated. Your fat stores remain locked and inaccessible. Your food intake is not enough to fill the energy gap, so your body screams for more food constantly. You are hungry every couple of hours. You spend the entire day thinking about food and fighting urges you can never fully silence, no matter how hard you try. The ketogenic diet, which is a very low carbohydrate diet, works because it unlocks this exact biological mechanism. It keeps insulin low enough for long enough that your body fully transitions into using fat as its primary and preferred fuel source. Some people like to argue that low-carb diets only work because people naturally end up eating fewer total calories anyway, but even if that argument were partially correct, it still cannot explain one crucial difference. Why do people following a ketogenic diet report almost zero cravings and genuine satisfaction between meals, while people who are just cutting calories are absolutely miserable and fighting hunger every single day without relief? The hormonal environment is completely different. The daily experience is completely different. The long-term results are completely different. And the ability to actually sustain the approach over time is completely different as well. Now, this entire transition does not happen overnight, and I want to be genuinely honest with you about the realistic timeline so that you go into this with the right expectations from the start. It takes roughly 2 to 3 days of keeping carbohydrates low to enter a state called ketosis. Ketosis is when your body begins producing molecules called ketones from fat and using them as fuel. This initial shift happens relatively quickly, but full fat adaptation is a deeper and far more complete metabolic transformation than simply being in ketosis. This deeper shift takes closer to 2 to 3 full weeks to occur. The difference between early ketosis and complete fat adaptation is significant and worth understanding clearly. In full fat adaptation, your body has thoroughly restructured its entire metabolic machinery. It is not just using ketones as a fuel source. It is tapping into multiple fat-burning pathways simultaneously and efficiently. Energy levels throughout the day become remarkably stable and consistent. Mental clarity frequently improves in ways people do not expect. Physical endurance holds up well even without carbohydrates fueling your muscles and your movements. Your body has genuinely become an efficient fat-burning system. For the practical breakdown of what to actually eat to reach and maintain this fat-adapted state, keep your carbohydrates at around 5% of your total daily food intake. Set your protein at approximately 20%. Fill the remaining calories with healthy dietary fats. Now let us talk specifically about what is happening inside your abdomen beneath the surface, because there are actually two distinct and different layers of fat in your midsection, and they behave very differently from each other. The first type is called visceral fat. This is the deep fat that sits inside your abdominal cavity and wraps directly around your internal organs. It is metabolically active and strongly linked to serious long-term health risks. Visceral fat is primarily and most effectively addressed through your diet. The low carbohydrate, insulin-lowering approach we have been discussing directly targets this deep internal fat layer. As insulin drops and fat burning increases, visceral fat is typically one of the first things to respond and reduce. The second layer is superficial fat, which is the fat you can actually see and pinch just beneath the surface of your skin. This outer layer is largely a spillover effect from deeper internal metabolic issues. As visceral fat reduces through consistent dietary changes, this outer visible layer tends to follow and reduce alongside it. But there is a critically important third layer that almost nobody in mainstream fitness ever discusses properly, and addressing this layer requires something different from diet alone. Beneath all of the fat layers, wrapping around your muscles and your organs, there is a layer of connective tissue called fascia. This is a firm gel-like substance that gives your midsection its overall structure, its firmness, and its visible tone. Fascia is living tissue that actively responds to how you use your body every day. When you engage it regularly through the right movements, it stays firm and structurally supportive. When you neglect it, it atrophies and loses its integrity. That atrophy is what creates the soft and flabby appearance in the stomach that so many people struggle with, even people who are not significantly overweight, even people who exercise regularly but are using the wrong movements for this specific tissue. This is the real reason why someone can do hundreds of crunches and sit-ups every single day for months on end and still not see a firm and genuinely flat midsection. They are simply not targeting the right tissue in the right way. And that brings us us finally to the exercise, the one movement that simultaneously targets the deep core muscles and the fascia layer together, creating real and visible toning in your midsection over consistent time. Before we go into exactly how to do it, we need to address why sit-ups and crunches are actually working against your goals in many important ways that most people do not realize. Most people assume that if their goal is a flat and tight stomach, then crunches and sit-ups must be the most logical starting point. More core work means a flatter stomach, right? Not exactly. Here's the specific problem with crunches. They heavily recruit a deep internal muscle called the psoas, which functions as a hip flexor connecting your lower spine directly to your upper legs. When you repeatedly perform crunching movements and shorten that muscle over and over again, it begins to adaptively tighten and pull on your lower spine from the front. Over time, this creates a serious structural imbalance in your back. Your lower spine gets pulled forward into an exaggerated arch. Your posture begins to suffer noticeably, and your stomach can actually appear more pushed outward and more prominent even if you are simultaneously losing fat through diet. So not only are crunches failing to fix the underlying problem with your midsection, they can actively make the visible appearance of your stomach look worse while also creating lower back pain that limits your activity. That is a genuinely bad trade to be making every morning. The exercise you need instead is called the dead bug. The name is unusual and a little amusing, and that is because the position genuinely resembles an insect that has flipped onto its back with all of its legs pointing upward into the air. But do not allow the unusual name to make you underestimate this movement. The dead bug is one of the most thoroughly effective core exercises that exists in the entire world of fitness and physical rehabilitation. The reason it works so well comes down to precisely what it targets and how it creates tension through your body. The dead bug activates the deepest stabilizing muscles of your core, the ones that wrap around your entire midsection like a firm internal corset. When these deep muscles are strong and properly engaged, they hold everything in your midsection tight and flat naturally and automatically. You do not have to think about sucking your stomach in. The strength is just there doing its job. At the same time, the specific movement pattern of the dead bug directly stimulates the fascia layer we discussed earlier. The controlled diagonal tension this exercise creates signals the fascia tissue to firm up and regain the structure it has lost through years of neglect and improper movement. On top of everything else, it dramatically improves your pelvic control, your spinal alignment throughout your entire torso, and your overall functional coordination. It makes you stand taller and straighter without effort. Your core becomes genuinely and functionally stable in a lasting way. Now here is exactly how to perform this exercise correctly every single day. Form is everything with this particular movement, and doing it incorrectly removes the majority of the benefit. Lie completely flat on your back on the floor. Bring both knees up so they are positioned directly above your hips. Your hips, your knees, and your ankles should all be bent at 90-degree angles simultaneously. Extend both arms straight up toward the ceiling above your chest. Now here is the single most important element of the entire exercise. Press your lower back completely and firmly flat against the floor beneath you. There should be absolutely no gap between your spine and the ground, not even a small one. This specific position is the entire foundation of the movement. When your lower back stays pressed flat and fully grounded against the floor, the deep core muscles are forced to engage and remain engaged throughout every single repetition you perform. The moment your lower back lifts even slightly off the ground, those deep stabilizing muscles switch off entirely. The exercise loses most of its benefit, and you are essentially just moving your limbs around without the core activation that makes this movement so powerful. From this carefully established starting position, slowly extend your left leg outward and downward toward the floor. Keep your toes pointing up toward the ceiling throughout the entire movement. Keep absolutely everything else completely and deliberately still. Your lower back stays pressed flat. Your arms stay pointed at the ceiling. Your right leg stays exactly where it started. Only your left leg moves, slowly and with complete control the entire time. Bring that leg back to the starting position with the same slow control you used to extend it. Do not let it drop. Do not rush the return. The controlled and deliberate tempo is precisely what creates the sustained tension that activates the deep core and stimulates the fascia tissue effectively. Then switch to the other leg and perform the exact same movement with with the same slow and controlled tempo. Lower back glued to the floor the entire time without exception. Only the working leg moves. This basic version alone, performed with correct form and true lower back contact with the floor, is already more effective for genuine midsection toning than any volume of crunches or sit-ups you could ever perform. Once you feel comfortable and confident with the basic single leg version, you can progress to the full and most powerful version of this exercise. This is where the real transformative power of the dead bug becomes fully apparent. As you slowly extend your left leg outward and downward, simultaneously reach your right arm back and overhead toward the floor behind your head. The opposite arm and the opposite leg move together at the same time in directly opposite directions away from your center. This cross-body diagonal movement creates a very specific and powerful tension pattern through your entire core, running from one corner of your body to the complete opposite corner diagonally. This diagonal tension activates the absolute deepest layers of your core musculature and creates the strongest possible stimulation of the fascia tissue throughout your midsection. Nothing else you can do produces this specific effect as effectively. This full opposite arm and opposite leg version, performed slowly with your lower back pressed completely flat to the floor throughout every single repetition, is the version that produces the most visible and lasting toning results over time. The one rule that never changes regardless of which version you are currently doing is this: your lower back must stay flat on the ground every single rep, every single set, every single day without any exceptions. The moment your lower back lifts up off the floor, stop immediately. Reset your position deliberately and carefully. Press your back flat again, then begin the next repetition fresh from that correct starting position. Do this exercise every single day without skipping. It does not need to be a long or exhausting session. A focused 10 minutes of correct and controlled repetitions performed consistently every day will produce dramatically better results than occasional longer sessions done with poor form and a lifted lower back. Within 1 to 2 weeks of truly consistent daily practice, you will begin to feel a noticeable and unmistakable difference in the firmness and deep stability of your midsection. Within several weeks beyond that, especially when combined with the dietary changes we have covered, you will begin to clearly see visible results in the mirror. The diet addresses and removes the fat layers covering your midsection. The dead bug simultaneously builds and firms the deep muscles and the fascia beneath. Together they address every single layer of what creates a soft, loose, and untoned stomach. Nothing important is left unaddressed by this combination. Let us now bring everything together into one clear and complete picture. A genuinely flat and tightened stomach is not the result of doing just one thing correctly in isolation. It is the result of truly understanding how your body actually functions at a deeper biological level, and then making choices that work with that biology instead of constantly fighting against it. Lower your carbohydrates to bring your insulin levels down consistently. Give your body the real physiological opportunity to tap into its own stored fat as a genuine fuel source throughout the day. Be patient and consistent through the 2 to 3 weeks it takes to become fully fat adapted at the metabolic level. Trust the process during that transition period even when the changes feel slow. And every single day without exception, perform the dead bug exercise with correct form. Activate your deep core muscles. Stimulate and firm the fascia layer. Build the kind of genuine internal structural strength that creates a truly flat and toned midsection from the inside out. This is not a shortcut or a trick. There are no real shortcuts that produce lasting results. But this is a completely real approach built entirely on established physiology that produces real and visible and lasting results when followed with genuine consistency. Once you feel your body running cleanly and steadily on its own fat between meals with zero hunger and zero cravings, and once you start feeling your deep core engage properly during the dead bug every morning, you will never want to go back to the old way again. Your body was genuinely designed to be lean and strong. It was designed to tap efficiently into fat for fuel. It was designed to have a firm and flat and well-supported midsection. You simply need to stop working against it and finally start working fully with it instead.